got an incredible panel, relatively large panel, so we're going to try and be super efficient with our time. And just sort of to give you a bit of a framing to it, the last couple of days we've had some amazing conversations, particularly around the food space, and I think everyone here pretty much has been involved in some of those conversations. And what I've seen is tons of inspiration and ideas and congratulations and success, and what we haven't heard tons about is what isn't going right and what the difficult questions are and what we really need to be pulling at and having a real look into so that we can get across the line with the kind of urgency that's coming with 2030 and kind of with the wider food system. So hopefully we can get into some of that. So what I'm going to do is set a little bit of a challenge on timekeeping to start us off with and ask for each of our panelists to do 2 minutes exactly, and I don't have a timer, but I've got my watch, in which I'd like you to introduce yourselves, your role in your company, but also answer the question, as we consider the future of food and farming, what do you see as the most significant global challenges and opportunities facing the food system? So I'm going to go from my left, Darcy.
Hi, I'm Darcy Vetter. I am the head of global public policy for PepsiCo, and I get to go first, so I don't have to worry about someone stealing my thunder. But when I think about our global food system, the sheer scale of the adaptation challenge, even before we get to mitigation, to me really stands out. And if we look at meteorological data, what we expect to happen with the climate on the trajectory we're on, some of the places that we're most dependent on for growing our major commodities won't be able to grow those commodities there anymore. And so how can we speed up the production of, or the use of regenerative practices, which will help buy us some time, make those farms more resilient? But also, how do we help farmers make what is going to be a big transition? And I grew up on a farm in the middle of Nebraska in the US, and my dad farmed the way his dad farmed the way his dad farmed in many ways, right? And so it's the same crops, your equipment, your culture is focused around a climate that might not exist anymore. And so the scale of helping a transition, not just necessarily in scale or equipment or technology, but maybe in what they grow altogether, or driving more diversity into those systems, is a big one. And so really anchoring our thinking in what it will take for farmers to transition to a rapidly changing and much more volatile world.
Beautiful timekeeping.
Sally Smith, so I'm from the Flora Food Group. As of last Wednesday, we were Upfield, so we've just gone through a name change, so you'll have to excuse me if I refer to the wrong company. But for those of us who don't know who we are, we have big brands in the kind of butters, cheeses, creams, but alternative to dairy space. Whoops, okay, that's okay. And look, we know that there's 3 big levers for change in the food system, right? We waste too much, we don't grow the right stuff in the right way, or we could grow better the stuff that we eat. And we need to shift our diets as well. We know we overconsume high impact diets. When you look at an Eat Lancet diet, that shift, particularly in countries that overconsume animal source ingredients, we've got to find a way to tip the balance and bring everybody in that food system with us, right? And there's, on the bit that interests me in particular is the space around the value that can bring to everyone, whether that's for climate, for nature, for health outcomes. And we know that recent research shows that for every $1 spent on the food dietary shift part of that, we get $5 of value back, right? So there's huge value in the system finding a way to do that, and then finding a way to redistribute the existing money in that system to create that outcome that we know we all need, right? And the urgency is critical and clear. And so my interest is in how we can play the role that we can as a food company in helping support that transition. Is that 2 minutes? No. Okay, sorry. Lovely,
I will save you a couple of minutes, at least 60 seconds on that. Lorena Lourido, I work for IKEA. I work for Inca, which is the retailer of IKEA. So if I take the food system in totality, with all the activities from farm to fork, and really focus on the part of retailing and consumer in the downstream, I think I can quote two main challenges. One connected to what you said, Sam, is about shifting the dietary preferences of the many people to more veggie, less meat. It's no more complicated than that. I'm gaining a friend here. It's no meat, it's less meat. And then the other part is about food waste and how we can really, from all the way, from the operations of big corporations and big organizations like we are, to all the way to what happens in consumer homes, how we can inspire people to make the shift. Because people want to make a difference and want to make a shift. Necessarily sometimes they don't know how, or they believe it's going to cost a lot of money to do it. So our job is to inspire and make it affordable for the many.
Super. Kevin?
Hello, everybody. My name is Kevin Muno. I'm the CEO of Perennial Pastures Ranch. We are a direct-to-consumer regenerative meat business based out of San Diego County. And unfortunately, or fortunately, I disagree with these two ladies here in terms of what needs to happen for the future of our food and for us to scale regeneration worldwide. And obviously, I'm a big proponent of regenerative agriculture. And regenerative agriculture is all about starting with the soil and healing the soil first. And really the only way we can do that at a global scale is with livestock, unfortunately. And we do that through really the movement of the livestock through the pastures. And we graze in a very intense way very quickly. And then we allow for a very long recovery period. So by healing the soil, we can really accelerate nutrient-dense foods worldwide, which is a very important part of healing our health and our population. Because I feel like we have an issue with our excuse me a sec. We have an issue with chronic illness. We have an issue with inflammation. And I really believe that to do that, we have to get closer to the soil. And we have to be about the soil. And to do this, we need regenerative agriculture. And it's very kind of personal to me in a way, because this is my livelihood, you know, this is how I make a living. And I think it's important, you know, these conferences bring a lot of people together, right? And they, you know, Ellie, you were saying that there's 10 presidents here this week, right?
I didn't say that, but
I think three presidents here this week. And so these are very important conversations for us to be having. And I'm excited to be up here with such big brands, Mars, IKEA. And it just perplexes me that we're still having this conversation when on the ground, us ranchers know, who are very close to the food, who are about the soil, who know how to heal the soil worldwide. These examples are clear, they're given. And so I don't want to make it, you know, about he said, she said, but the Lancet diet, I mean, they were ranking Cheerios above grass-fed beef. Like, I don't know how that's possible in a world that we want to heal our kids and heal the population. You know, we have a chronic disease epidemic, and I think it's been proven that an animal-based diet or something close to the ground, close to nature, is actually what heals. And the data will say that as well. The Western A. Price diet, the work of Dr. Stefan Von Vliet from Utah State in terms of nutrient density. So I don't want to get too intense, but I'm doing it right here at the start, just because I got a lot on my heart, you know, and we're still having these conversations here. And I told myself I didn't want to come to New York and just parrot some lines. You know, I want to have some real conversations about where we're headed with the food. So I'm honored to be on this panel here. I'm kind of the outlier in terms of I'm a small business, you guys are giants, but I think this is really important. So I don't know if we can, that certainly opened up the conversation, and Ellie, you can take it from there, from where we go.
I'm going to have a great time with this one, but I appreciate the candor and the willingness to have a difficult conversation.
Way over my 2 minutes, I apologize.
Yeah, I mean, timekeeping. You haven't got any more airtime now, Kevin, so. Daniela.
So I was going to say a few things about what I think is the most important, but Kevin, you've just dived into probably the most heated discussion that we have within my business, which is I'm from Ahold Delhaize. We're a large grocery business, so we have 16 brands down the east coast of the US. Some of them you might have heard of. Stop and Shop, Food Lion are our biggest ones, and all over Europe. And we have this conversation specifically about beef, because when we look at our breakdown of our Scope 3 emissions, beef is the biggest lever that we can pull to reduce our emissions. It's astronomically off the page compared with the other kind of categories that we look at. And it's the hardest discussion, because there's so many kind of cultural connections, particularly in the US. I mean, we're in the North Carolinas. There's connections around, you know, retailers telling people what to eat, and in the US that's just a no-no. There's the markets are very different. So we look at the Dutch market, for example. Meat sales have been falling quarter on quarter, 9 quarters in a row. So I think when I listen to you speak, I can hear the passion, and I hear that in my business as well. And I think one, it's great that we're having this conversation, and we can have a panel that where we can speak freely and have this conversation. Because the worst thing is if we don't have it, and then we get the kind of plant-based versus the livestock sector. I think when I listen to you speaking, I'm thinking I'd really like to find out more about the regen beef that you're talking about. I think we are looking at protein ratios in our business. In countries like Serbia, we have like 20% plant versus animal based protein ratio. We want to level that up. So we're not saying no meat, we're not saying no beef. That's just not the guidance that we want to follow, but we are saying more vegetables, more plants, more legumes in that kind of mixed diet.
Perhaps we can differentiate too between regenerative beef and just commodity beef to further refine the conversation.
Sure.
Yeah.
Good luck, Barry.
Hey, it's great to have a real farmer on the panel. That's great. Yeah, Barry Parkin and I head up sustainability and procurement for Mars Incorporated. We're a big global food business, 100 brands, operate all over the world. But turning it into a sort of agricultural scope, you know, we have about 30 million tons of GHG emissions, which is the same as Finland. So big companies matter. And of that, 60% of that is connected to agriculture. So agriculture is at the heart of our business, and farming. There's about 1 million farmers in our supply chain. A lot of smallholder farmers, as well as big ranchers and big producers in the north. So we have to transform farming if we're going to transform our greenhouse gas footprint and other things. You know, I thought 2 thoughts to sort of steer the conversation around for me. One is, you know, I'm optimistic because regenerative agriculture works, and we know it does. and we can value that and count it in our greenhouse gas footprint. We've got projects all over the world. We're on the path to. We've got projects underway that will get us to 1 million acres under regenerative agriculture. So we're doing a lot of crops. Super interested in beef as well. We buy beef as well. A lot of pet food has beef in it. So I'm interested in buying the bits he can't sell to consumers, because I can use that. And then the other thought, I think, which is a little bit divergent, is the big challenge we have across those million farmers is that many of them live in poverty or extreme poverty. And that's smallholder farming in most parts of the global south. So unless we solve that, we're not going to solve regenerative agriculture or do anything clever on those farms. We have to solve poverty first. And so that's the big challenge, and it's really difficult to do.
It's such an important question, that the social justice angle, but also the global one. And I think, to everyone's point, I think the panel has a lot more in common than it doesn't, in the sense that we broadly seem to agree around regenerative farming as a positive thing, see the need for greater collaboration across the food system, and also, I think, although maybe to a lesser extent, see the value of zooming out and looking at it as a food system rather than its individual parts, potentially. And I don't want to not have the conversation about beef. I think we should be here for it, but equally, I don't think we're going to solve it today. So we'll try to incorporate it as much as we can, because I think it's a really important one, the question of shifting protein ratios, as Lorena and Daniela pointed out, but also thinking about what is a global diet that's sort of appropriate to think about. I think if we sort of work down the value chain, or up the value chain rather, and go from supply through to demand side, Barry, you talk a lot about how big the agriculture side of your work is at Mars, and I think there's a really interesting question about what we can do at scale to transform ag, and what is having the biggest impact in terms of those projects you mentioned. What can others be thinking about to really shift the dial on the supply side with ag?
Yeah, I think starting at a broadest, the reason I've got both titles as Chief Sustainability Officer and Chief Procurement Officer is this is a procurement challenge, and we have to redesign supply chains, and we have to redesign agriculture. So, I often say to our teams, unless you change what we buy, or where we buy it, or how we buy it, or who we buy it from, you're never going to change our footprint. And we've committed to halve our footprint by 2030, all scopes, while doubling the size of the business. So that's a 4x improvement. That is nothing to do with continuous improvement. So we have to do some pretty radical things. So some of it will be substituting from higher carbon to lower carbon materials and ingredients. But then it'll be about putting in place the known technologies around regenerative agriculture. So the interesting thing about regenerative agriculture, we looked at this a few years ago, of all the cropland in the world, about 12% is under some form of regenerative practices. And you think, okay, and it's been known, these practices have been known for decades. The mind-blowing fact is it's only growing at 1% a year. So we don't have 100 years to turn agriculture regenerative. So there's something in the way. The early adopters have adopted, and the rest are stuck. And it's about incentives. There aren't sufficient incentives and knowledge to get farmers to change. So we're just getting on with it. So we're just investing. We think it's a transition cost where we need to help and fund the farmer with a premium for a number of years to get them over the hump. So I guess, in a way, it's very simple. This can be done. The technologies are well known. Techniques are well known. But you have to pay. If nobody's willing to pay, it isn't going to happen. And we're willing to pay.
I think it's such a good point, and that question of incentivization and subsidy and regulation will come up, I'm sure, time and again. Kevin, from your perspective, you have a transitioned business model. You're one of the 12%. In the context of most farming stories, we're talking about margins that are pretty tight. What do you think it takes, and what has it taken for you to be able to do farming the way that you do it?
I think that's one of the beauties of regenerative agriculture, is that for the farmer or rancher, it is more profitable. So when you work with nature and you work with the soil, your inputs reduce over time and your outputs increase over time. Nature always bats last. I know very scaled up ranches in Australia that are running 5,000 head with 2 full-time equivalents, and their cost of production is 10 cents per pound live weight. That's the best in the world that I've heard. It's very cheap to produce that way, and again, very nutrient dense. So in terms of shifting the story, we can have margin on the procurement side, but we can also have margin on the production side as well, and we have to be looking from the soil to the end product. And I guess that's another thing that I have some insight on too, is we sell direct to consumer, and so we get to capture that margin as well by selling the end product, right? And I think hopefully we see globally more transition to direct to consumer businesses as well, because people do want to know and meet their farmer. But I recognize as well, as a direct to consumer business, that we're not going to move the needle unless we work with the retailers on this stage right here, right? You have tremendous buying power. You have tremendous buying power. You guys all have tremendous buying power. And so if we're going to move the needle, we have to make the wholesale markets work. And we're only going to make that work if we're actually producing food at a profit from the ground up. So if there's more margin on the production side, there's going to be more margin for me to sell pet food to you, right? So I think that's an important piece to hit on.
It's a really good one. And actually, Sally, I really want to get onto with you in a minute on what we're subsidizing and how we subsidize it from the kind of public side. But firstly, whilst we're on the topic of incentivization, PepsiCo do quite a lot of work around incentivizing farmer shifts and ranchers, well, not ranchers so much, but farmer shifts in the arable side. What are you doing that seems to be genuinely transforming the way that your supply side's working?
So first of all, I was so focused on keeping to my 2 minutes that I forgot to remind you that when a lot of people hear PepsiCo, of course you think Pepsi, the brand that matches our name. But important to remember as well that we are a snacks business with Lay's potato chips, Doritos, Quaker Oats, so a variety of commodities, 30 plus from 60 some countries. So truly global business, multiple products that we are sourcing from. And we are working with our farmers. I talked first about that adaptation challenge and converting those acres. We're doing a lot with different groups of farmers to help them adopt those different practices. So we have 2 different projects that really focus on providing transition payments. So upfront cost sharing with farmers at a payment per acre for adopting certain regenerative practices. We pair that either with help in integrating then those practices into a business model and helping them figure out how that will pencil out over time, which Kevin talked about, or with agronomic advice to say, here is, if you're going to use a cover crop, here's the one that works best for the crops that you're planting in your geography, your climate, et cetera. Those new practices have to be really tailored to the farm for them to be successful. And so we try to pair that, again, financial support with agronomic advice or with advice on that business model. The other kind of incentive, I guess you could call it an incentive, but it's really sharing in the risk. One of the things we do is we know that often farmers use more inputs than they need to, right? If a little fertilizer is good, maybe a lot will be better. And so we have a program that offers a yield guarantee that for farmers who agree to cut back on their use of nitrogen fertilizer, if their yield comes down, we'll pay them the difference. The interesting thing is we've never had to pay. But again, having farmers feel secure that they're not putting their business at risk if they change this long-time practice helps them take the first step. And you don't have to ask them twice, right? Because the cost of that fertilizer is extensive. So those are ways that we are trying to create incentives. But the fact is, what we can provide, it doesn't fully account for the cost of transition or new equipment or cover crop seeds, right? It's farmers who are otherwise inclined, who are thinking about, making this change, who kind of make the jump and reap the benefits over time. We know also that policy and aligning the kinds of incentives that farmers also see to make sure that they are pushing for or making the regenerative choice the default choice. We need government to work hand in hand with us so that crop insurance products can reward the fact that we know regenerative practices make acres more resilient. Can you reflect that in premia? Can you reflect that in loans, for certain commodities and financing terms? So we know that, globally, governments are heavily involved in the agriculture sector. They're creating incentives or subsidies at various points along the chain. How can we look at those critically and say, are those incentives aligning to drive toward the practices we need to see?
Thanks, Darcy. Now, getting on to the meatier side of things. Sally, you and I did some work earlier this year at which two things came up. One was, it would be great if the food groups could be in a room more with farmers and ranchers to have these kinds of conversations. And the other thing is that there's a real sense that the incumbent food system is subsidizing a way of eating that maybe doesn't speak to planetary and population health. I would love to hear more about your thinking around what it is we need to change the subsidization of, and in favor of what and how it might work.
It's a huge question, right? Wow. So you're right. We try really hard to bring together the right people in the room, and we had a great conference with a bunch of stakeholders from across our value chain. And do remember that whilst the majority of what we utilize on the ingredient side is plant-based, there's farmers at the end of those supply chains as well. And often those farmers are in mixed systems. So we don't have a single crop that we utilize, a single natural ingredient, that isn't grown in rotation or in amongst other things that farmers rely on for income, right? So smallholders in the Philippines who supply our coconuts through really extensive long supply chains are intercropping with other ingredients in those landscapes to be able to have a diverse source of income. The guys that we source from cooperatives in Kansas and Iowa for soy, for products like Country Crock, well-known brand that extends to everybody, hopefully, homes-wise in the US, from the heart of Kansas, that comes from farms that do cover cropping. We support a program on cover cropping and rotation, that more often than not have dairy cattle as part of that rotation, and it does provide critical and crucial benefits. And nobody knows better than the farmer in the field. And just because I come from Yorkshire, what I know about farming is very different to what a Kansas farmer knows about farming his land in his place. And that's very different from what the farmers that we work with in Kenya on canola, with partners like Ag Ventures providing technical solutions, know. Right? So I think really important that we recognize place. And we also need to shift diets. So what is it that needs to happen in that space? There's a lot of incentives, subsidies, rules, policy guidelines that have created a food system that we have today. Farmers were asked post World War II to provide food security, right? Affordable, accessible calories for millions of people. All of us, we rely on them. And they've done, frankly, a phenomenal job and don't necessarily always get the reward in the system for that job. And now we're asking them to pivot, right, and do something different, and we don't have all the answers for how that's going to work. But it's very clear that by 2050, if we still eat what we eat today, with the population growth that's on the cards, the numbers don't stack up, right? They just don't. So we have to enter this space with humility and learn from each other, with some grace, hopefully, and invite those conversations about what is the place for regenerative and the benefits that that can provide, and what is the space for dietary shift, and how do we enable that in a way that allows you to do that. So in my space, where we're looking at how we deliver products that can help in that transition, that can help the transition in the food system. Plant butters, creams, cheeses, blend products as well, right? Not all of our products are vegan. We have products that have some aspects of dairy milk in them because they provide a really unique flavour profile, and the nutrient density of our products is crucial to that proposition. But those products have to deliver first and foremost on taste. You've got to want to love to eat it, right? We're talking about food here. This is something we enjoy every day, and we can't forget that, right? It has to sing to your soul when you sit around a table and share it with your friends and family. You've got to want to eat it, right? It's got to nourish not just your body, but your soul in the way in which you think about it. It's got to be affordable. The vast majority of the people that we sell our products to, right, we want everybody to be able to access healthy, sustainable foods to support a sustainable diet. So the affordability aspect of it is key and critical, but subsidies run into the existing system. They don't necessarily run into, in the policy rules, the system that we're going to need to create. So there has to be some redirection of subsidies to support the work that we know delivers value on the farm, restores soil health, supports those outcomes that we absolutely critically have to have for nature, but delivers on a diet that we know is better for us with lower impact on the planet that we're all going to rely on.
Beautiful. Yeah. No, I think that's a really succinct way of putting it, and very diplomatic.
It's an and, right? It's an and.
I think the bit that we're missing, and Lorena, I'm going to come to you, but probably I'd like to hear from Daniela on this as well, is so IKEA, you touched on already how you're shifting towards choices in favour of more plant. And I'm interested in kind of what your aims are there and your methods and so on, but also about food waste, but specifically looking at influencing consumer behaviour. And that's a really interesting thing. How do we drive that demand side in favour of a transitional food system, whatever that might look like, whether or not it's more plant heavy? What are the kind of levers that you're pulling, and how much success are you seeing, and what's really resonating with your customers? No, that's for you, Lorena.
Okay, I thought that you said Daniela first. So it's quite an extensive question, because we go from all the way from plant-rich diet to food waste. So if I start with the food waste part first, so we see our responsibility in two dimensions. The first one, and the things that we have done so far, is connected to our operations, the food waste that we generate in our operations. We have the privilege and the responsibility of being the largest restaurant in every city where we operate an IKEA store. So, of course, that generates a lot of waste in our own operations. And then food is precious, but waste is totally unnecessarily, from both an ethical but also a cost perspective. And we also know, just maybe adding another element in the discussion, that when we tackle the cost, we tackle the waste, there is also an impact. We generate savings that then we can reinvest to offer our consumers even lower prices. This is how we operate in IKEA. There is no more secrets than that. Yeah, maybe a couple of them more, but then no more than in a simple way. And then from the other part, in connected with the consumers, we in IKEA we are known for our home furnishing credentials. We connect with people. We know how people live at home. For 80 years, we've been connecting with the homes, all the activities that happen when people is at home. And then we know that we can support with our knowledge, our know-how, our reach. We reach 1 billion people worldwide every year, 665 with the food business alone. We know we have that reach and that knowledge to try, and from a humble perspective, inspire how people can operate and save waste at home. Food waste, we said that at the beginning, in the consumers, in all our households, is the biggest contributor today. So we know that we have both responsibility, but also the privilege to connect with the many. And with that, really focusing on what we need to do. And we started the journey in 2016. So we started as early adopters. In our own operations, we reached the commitment of halving 50% reduction of the food waste in 2021. But then we continue. We cannot stop. This is an all over story that we need to continue feeding each other and connecting with each other. So we will continue with that. We will continue on starting now with a work that we done with you in a new systemic approach, where now our focus will be with the consumers, how we can nudge and inspire and enable the many. And then we are also taking a third layer, which is trying to inspire and learn for all the experts around and influence policy making. I think that when we talk about the barriers and we talk about the challenges, I think the really speeding up and consistency in policy making around the globe is going to be paramount. Yeah, and food waste is one of them.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Daniela, I'd really like your input on what's driving consumer behaviour change from the Ahold side.
Yeah, I think it's a really interesting one. People ask me, how do we get consumers to care about sustainability, about regen ag, about health? And my answer is simple: they do. In every single market, they do care. But we've mentioned things like taste, and we've mentioned affordability. And for Ahold Delhaize, one of the things that we are a mainstream retailer. So affordability is probably the most important thing that we focus on for our customer. And so the question then is, how do you serve your customers healthy and affordable food? And I think as retailers, we've got a history of being able to use our creative arsenal to do exactly that. Some people call it choice editing, some people call it nudging, but we have a whole host of factors that we can use to help people make better choices. And it's not rocket science, and it's a kind of ladder of intervention. It starts with information, informing our customers about what is healthier for them, what is a better choice, and for that we need systems, and we need unified systems. So on health, we need a system of nutritional navigation that customers can recognize and rely on. In Europe, we have Nutri-Score. In the US, we use a system called Guiding Stars. We use the How Good system for environmental credibility. But we have to be very careful about making claims, environmental claims. And when we've done that information, then we have to ensure that we have a product mix that inspires our customers. So if they go into a store in our Dutch business, which is probably the most mature, if you like, market that we have in Europe, you'll find over 200 plant-based products, for example, Terra we call it, that are doing extremely well, have taken off in the Dutch market. You'll find that the mix of burgers where we're mixing kind of plant and beef together to lower the emissions. You'll find an amazing array of fresh produce that we're really proud of in all of our brands. But it's just there. So the choice edit is there for people. They can make better decisions just through being in the store. So they're informed, they're inspired. And the next thing we can do is incentivize customers to keep coming back, keep eating healthier and more sustainable products. And the way we do that is through our loyalty scheme. So we know a lot about how our customers buy, what they like, and what's going to nudge them into more sustainable behaviors. So what we do is focus on incentivizing around fresh and healthy products, for example, and give customers a 10% discount if they continue to kind of add more fresh products into their shop. So that inform, inspire, and incentivize. And then the last one is, of course, we make a lot of our own stuff. So we have private brands. So we look at improving. You could call it the 4 I's, improving all the time, continuous improvement, of making sure we have traceability and transparency, making sure our products are healthier. And that's the way we do it, and it works to a certain extent, using that formula in all of the markets that we're in, because when consumers go into our stores, they want something that's affordable, that's quick and easy, and that to know that we're helping them make the right choices.
I think you raise a really interesting point. In the next question after this one, Kevin, I want to hear more about your customer behavior and what they're coming to buy from you for. But first, I think it'd be really interesting, Barry and Darcy, I think there's a similar thing here, right? Customers are looking for affordability and convenience. How much do they care about your regenerative practice? Is there any indicator that says they're buying that over something else?
Not really. So, we're trying to perform this magic trick where the product stays exactly the same for the next 10 years, but it's got half the footprint. And we think that's possible. So we don't need the consumer to choose on the first part of the journey. Think about greenhouse gases. We can halve the footprint by being clever in the background with the supply chains and the ingredients we do it. So the Snickers bar tastes the same. So the pedigree pet food tastes the same to the cat, the dog. And therefore, it's a bonus if the consumer starts to reward us for that. I think beyond that, we'll have to get more radical with the proposition, and the proposition may need to change, and we will need to shift behaviours and diets and find new incentives. But we don't need to do that immediately, and we're just learning as we go. The best activation we've done in store, interestingly, is around our Sheba brand. Where we have a fantastic coral reef regenerative program, and the activation is about Sheba Hope Reef, and we've got the biggest coral reef restoration project in the world. Wherever we've done that in store, it's captured consumers' hearts and minds, and we sell a whole load more product. And it's got hardly anything to do with the product. Of course, the fish come from the reefs, etc., etc. There's a tenuous link, but you've got to capture the consumer's interest and inspire them, and then you get rewarded for it. So I guess that's my answer.
I love that. Buy the dog food and get a holiday.
Cat food.
Cat food, sorry. I'm not a pet owner. Darcy, how about you?
The answer in many ways is the same, right? We have some smaller brands. Think our Bear apple chips, for example, for maybe a more health or an eco-conscious consumer might be looking and reading that label. But I don't think most consumers in the potato chip aisle, right, are thinking about the sustainability journey. And we don't really see an opportunity, we don't expect that the premium will necessarily be paid for those activities. They just expect that that's part of our business plan at this point, right? That they shouldn't be paying more for it, but that a company our size has integrated those practices, right? I think there's more and more of that expectation. So, not really. I don't think for most of our customers that's their primary reason for that choice, but I do think there's a growing expectation that that's just part of good business, and that we have to, continue to make progress in that area. I will say that, as Barry was saying, behind the scenes, right, we're doing all of these things, but the Snickers taste the same. And we've been talking about, the link between the agriculture piece that we're talking about and food and health. And, our potato chips, I think, probably taste the same, but they have a lot less salt than we did before. So, we are trying to meet that consumer expectation while thinking about the ways that we can reformulate to drive healthier outcomes. And maybe consumers will never know the difference, but that's an important place for us to be making that change too, not just at the field, but in the product that we're delivering and the nutritional profile there.
I think where the consumer does care is when there's a local aspect to it. So where we see, our supply chain is direct to farmer, and the story is about the local farm and the regenerative agricultural practices, then it makes sense. Then it's closer to home, and then there's a interest in the consumer.
Well, I think that's such a neat segue because perhaps ironically, Kevin, I assume your customers do care and really come to you for the things that you invest in the soil.
For sure. Yeah, I say the gateway to regenerative agriculture is a plant-based diet, believe it or not. And we're in 15 farmers markets every week. We have constant conversation with our customers. A lot of our customers are coming to us being years on a plant-based diet, and they're not feeling good anymore. And they come to regenerative agriculture because they probably went to veganism or vegetarianism because of the environmental benefits. When they learn about regenerative agriculture, they get to kill two birds with one stone. They get the environmental benefits, and then they also get the nutrient density benefits of what we bring to the table, which is not just beef. We sell chicken, we sell lamb. We've partnered with Regenified, which is one of the larger certification bodies in regenerative, and we're mapping nutrient density and all these things. So it's a bit of a tough conversation, I would say, up here, just because I think I'm a D2C guy that wants to make the shift to retail. And I see a lot of producers actually wanting to sell to us because we do a better job of telling the story. And just to be honest, although there's been a lot of consolidation in the retail space over the years. I mean, if you look at retailer after retailer being bought up by, Kroger and all the big retailers that are here, I think it's tough to really have that connection as a retailer, to be frank. And so there's kind of a dichotomy going on here where you're seeing a lot of consumers go straight to the farmer and bypassing the retailer. Now, again, I'm a direct-to-consumer producer that wants to scale and wants to sell to retail. I haven't made the jump yet to like a Whole Foods or a Costco or whatever, and I'm not idealistic enough to think that we're going to change the world by not going into retail. But I think we got to be honest about why consumers buy, and they buy for personal connection. They want to know where their food is coming from. They want to be able to shake their rancher's hand and know the whole story. Not all of them. There's obviously the price conversation, and so I'm dealing mostly with, more affluent folks. But I believe as we mature the regenerative agriculture marketplace, we can actually produce these goods cheaper, and there can be more spread across the supply chain for those goods to come down. They're high right now. Should they be high in the future? Maybe, because they're more nutrient dense. We tested our beef, and it's got 3 times the amount of omegas compared to conventional beef, right? Our chicken has phytonutrients that are off the charts. So should we have that premium in the marketplace because we're producing actually more nutrient dense foods? I want to come back to a point you made earlier, Sally, in terms of farmers are doing a great job in terms of producing calories. I think we have to get away from that mindset. We have to get to the mindset of producing nutrients. How good are farmers and ranchers at producing nutrients? Because that whole post-industrial World War II mindset of let's produce and let's plant fence row to fence row, let's be honest, that hasn't been good for global health, both from a personal perspective but also from a soil health perspective. So we have to kind of get away from that mindset and get really bought into the power of regeneration, which is putting biology back into the soil. That goes to the plant, that goes to the animal, and then that comes to us. And then in terms of food waste, we can do a really great job there too in terms of cycling those nutrients back onto the farm, right? And so, I mean, it's a tough conversation up here right now just because, I'm thinking in my head as direct to consumer, like our business is growing and we're connecting, and then when I hear like they're not having any traction with regenerative, it makes me sad in some cases just because I really think that this movement needs to take off for us to have some change. I'm kind of hanging my hat on the nutrient density angle. I hope that people with the health of, everyone starts with their own personal health, or if somebody dies in their family or whatever, that's what really starts kicking them into gear on this deal.
Can I come in and try and give you some hope?
Sure, yeah, that'd be great.
So just on the point on kind of what's driving vegans and vegetarians, actually, our research suggests that the biggest thing that drives them is animal welfare.
Okay, yeah.
Right,
yeah.
And I think that's the compelling part of your story,
Yeah.
in the difference of the model that you have.
Right.
Because the challenge, and we see an increasing awareness, we see an increasing concern, not just about my health and what I eat and finding the right nutrients for me and my kids, not only about the wider impact on the environment, less so than health, right? Health is the bigger driver. Underneath affordability and do I like the taste of it, right? So let's be clear on the hierarchy of what's really mattering. Do I like the taste of it? Is it affordable?
Nutrient-dense food tastes better, too.
Is it healthy? Is it sustainable? But in that mix, for a growing proportion of the population, is this question of animal welfare. And that's connected to this huge challenge around zoonotic disease spread, about antibiotic resistance, about those really systemic risks that we also face. So the play around why some of those people will be coming and finding a way to have some meat and dairy that they know is better meat and dairy from people that they trust. Mm-hmm. I suspect, I can't say for a fact, but I think it's probably in that space around animal welfare.
Sure.
Because it's a critical factor that's starting to rise up the agenda.
Yeah, yeah. That's great.
That's my hope.
I love hope. I love hope. Yeah.
Thanks for the hope. I will come to audience questions because I know there's lots of people who want to ask something. Before I do, Lorena, just in terms of what it is that's driving consumer choice in Ingka, IKEA, have you got demand from your customers? Are they asking for more? Is nutrient density or animal welfare on the radar in terms of what they're asking for? Because we've heard kind of what your outward push is. What are you hearing from them?
So it's interesting to hear all my colleagues just talking about what we receive as a demand from consumers. They want choice. They want to be able to take the initiative. So they want choice, and we made that choice affordable. So they don't choose even going into more meat, dairy, or plant-based. So they want to have the freedom to make it happen. So one of the things they say to us is, please make it possible. Make it possible for us to make it super delicious, very tasteful, make it nutritional, the nutritional density with family, with children, which is our primarily consumer focus. But they want to be able to make the decision, and they want information that enables them to make the decision. Then there are people that they have health impacts that they need to, there are people with issues that they need to face, and many allergens. So there's a lot about the allergen that is coming into the food ingredients, and more information is very connected in the way crops rise, the stock is rise as well, because of the antibiotics you mentioned, but there is a rise in allergens. I think 8 out of 10 people, they suffer some kind of allergen or something connecting the health system that they need to make dietary choices for their health. So we hear loads about them. That we also hear a lot, don't impose. We come out when we go out and we want to enjoy, so give us that indulgence as well. But what we have seen since we make a decision in 2022 that all the plant-based foods that we will offer, it will be in the Ingka markets, in our 30 markets, it will be lower or same price than the meat alternatives to give the people the choice. So we see people trying, and we see a percentage, 62% rise in our plain plant-based dishes, the comparable dishes from one year to the other. And what that gives us as retailer is also to support the complete end-to-end. Because if we can buy more, we can support the cost development in the right direction. So we can support both ends, because today a plant-based diet, from a cost perspective, is far more expensive. Yeah. So, but then people is about choice, it's about freedom and a lot of information. And then something I haven't heard yet, let's not forget of the new generations. I don't think that we have many people here with us that they are less than 20 years old. If there is anyone, please raise your hand. No? So this new generation, they come equipped with so much information. They come equipped with really clear statements, what they accept and they don't. So I think that we also need to make an effort to invite them to share with us.
I think it's a really good point. And I think there's also a lot more similarity than difference in what you're saying, which is that we need to support the equal access to food that is better, whether that is more nutrient dense or higher in health or more plant-based, whatever that looks like. There's an equity of access question that needs to be addressed across the food system. I'm going to come to the audience because you've been patiently waiting. Before I do, can I just get a bit of a show of hands, because we've got a self-selecting group here who are both sustainability focused and food focused. I wonder if you might be willing to be brutally honest, and because I would assume there's quite a high proportion of yeses to these questions, but I've got a few questions on just kind of show of hands. How many people in the room are vegetarian? Okay, not many, that's less than I thought. And how many people, when buying meat, look always, even if you're having a delivery or a takeaway, at the welfare of the produce that you buy? Few. And then how many people think about personal health as a driver when they're buying food? Oh, wow. That's quite significant. Sorry, I didn't ask my panelists. No, that's really interesting, thank you. And just my final one, nutrient density. How important is that when you're buying food? Okay. Well, that's really affirming. Okay, I'm going to move over to questions from the audience then. Who's got my mic? Oh, well, you can have my mic. Thanks, Barry. Go. Should we take two together, and then I'll point them in the right direction?
Thank you, first of all, panelists and moderator. This was one of the sessions this week that I've been looking forward to the most, because you never really get grower, producer, retailer, CPG on the same stage as one another. So it was fascinating to hear the dialogue and the back and forth. My name's Luke Richards. I work at Downforce Technologies. We provide soil health and soil organic carbon monitoring at scale. We are working to sort of empower growers with the data they need to prove that their regenerative journey is working. And it's very interesting hearing of the multinationals and the very large regenerative transition projects that are being, publicised. 1,000 acres to transition, 1 million acres, to transition. That's fantastic. But at some point, that project level financing doesn't scale across the million farmers, for example. So my question for the panel is, farmer insurance, agricultural insurance, particularly in America, we've got the Farm Bill coming up next year. What role do the CPGs and do the retailers, the corporates, what additional role can they play in moving the insurance game along so that the regenerative growers can get insured? For example...
Bye, Barry. Thank you.
For example, one of the growers that we're working on a number of case studies with, he's based out of Colorado. He's practiced regenerative agriculture for the last 8 years. He has successfully transitioned his business, but half his business is not insured, so he absorbs all the risk. Of course, the input companies have very talented lobbyists and marketing teams, so there's some sort of dialogue there, but I'm just wondering if there might be some extra comments around the insurance and the role that the corporates might be able to play to move things along.
Thank you, Luke. I'm going to take one more and then we'll do them as a group.
It's actually quite funny. Mine goes really really well to your question. But
Beautiful.
hi, I'm Corey. I work at Shake Shack leading sustainability. And my question was more about the Farm Bill and what your organizations are doing from like an advocacy standpoint, or specifically what would you want to see in this upcoming iteration of the Farm Bill to support regenerative agriculture and farmers transitioning?
Getting dangerously close to the election, which I'm not allowed to talk about. Yeah. But no, we've got two great questions. What are we doing to move insurance? And then what kind of advocacy are you thinking about in relations to the latest iteration on the Farm Bill? Who wants to take it? Well, should we go first on insurance? Do you want to do that one?
Sure, I do both. Yeah. So I think those are really great questions, right, on the different ways that the Farm Bill and programs help to sort of manage risk, right? So in my life before PepsiCo, at one point I was the Undersecretary of Agriculture in charge of farm programs. So I can tell you that the profile of products that are covered by different forms of crop insurance have changed immensely and continue to change and evolve. So it used to be very hard to get crop insurance if you were an organic producer. There are now a variety of organic products for which there are insurance products available. Do they match every producer's scale or scope or diversity? Unclear, right? It's not always, it may still be expensive. The data set on which premia are set, has to grow over time to be more accurate. So I think there's an evolution of those tools, and that's something we would continue, right? We need to drive diversity in crop rotations to get the resilient outcomes we're hoping for, and we need farmers to be able to manage that risk across crops, right? So I think you see a broad recognition of that, and that, diversification of those insurance products needs to come with it. And was in a conversation over a dinner last night, kind of talking about the ways that we manage risk. And then you were talking about the Farm Bill. This past administration is really focused on climate smart agriculture and a variety of different programs across commodities, looking at how to bring value back to farmers for those regenerative practices. PepsiCo is very proud that we're participating in some of those climate smart ag programs. And I think there's an opportunity for USDA to pull from that the data across all of those commodities and different products and say, which of those are working? What are the metrics that, the horticulture producer in California and the corn producer in Illinois are using to measure the outcomes of those regenerative practices? And then how can that data very intentionally go to inform the next set of insurance products, of risk management tools, and ecosystem services markets in that next Farm Bill? So I think we're looking very closely at making sure we fully participate in the program. We, look at how we're able to drive farmer value, but then make sure that USDA uses all the knowledge from that to make the next iteration sort of more effective.
Thank you. Did anyone else want to come back on that one?
One thing I'd say on that is I think if we could remove some of the grain subsidies that are artificially propping up the feedlot system, we'd see a lot more change and incentivize grass-fed, grass-finished producers to produce more nutrient-dense beef. We now know the omega-6 to omega-3 profile on grain-finished beef is around 18 to 20 to 1. The best grass-fed beef, grass-finished beef in the world is 1.5 to 1 omega-6 to omega-3, better than salmon. So I think we would all be a lot healthier population if we actually just had a level playing field and just allowed the producers to determine who's going to be the lowest cost producer without the government subsidies.
Thanks, Kevin. Next question? Oh, I can't do that. The lady in the striped top and then the green chests.
Thank you everybody for all of your insights. It's been extremely interesting to hear all the different perspectives. Mine is very much on that kind of consumer mindset. I think you've all spoken a lot about purchasing motivators, ignoring the kind of core part of food, which is obviously taste, then you're going to accessibility and cost. Do we genuinely think cross-generational as well? Because you mentioned, Gen Z, Gen Alpha is kind of, they've got whole different minds. But do we think that sustainability is a core motivator if people are going into a supermarket and looking at one product versus another? Will they choose that product because of sustainability claims?